and we play America's original music.
Where'd the old town go? They moved it all north of here in the shopping mall. Ooh, where'd the old town go? Did my hometown get old, or just me? Did all my friends get old, or just me? Are they all gonna have to be told, or just me?
Good morning and welcome to Old Town Cleveland here on Whoop FM 99.9, or you can go to the internet at www.whoopfm.com. You can call us at 614-5553. If you normally think, hey, they come on at 10 o'clock, well, this is our early morning segment. Every once in a while we have a special guest that we have come in, and I think we have a very special guest today. How about introducing
Well,
our
not
guest
only is
today?
he a special guest, but he's a good friend of mine. We have Troy Petit visiting us from Webbers Falls, Oklahoma, and he is a Supreme Court Justice for the Cherokee Nation. Along with that, he's also the Executive Director of the National Trail of Tears. Easy for me to say.
And he plays Sam Houston quite often, I understand.
I understand too. Good morning, Troy.
Good morning. It's good to be here.
And he is visiting this area, and you will have opportunity to meet him in person tomorrow at 2 o'clock at the Blythe Ferry Cherokee Memorial Removal Park. If you remember where you used to go get on the ferry, just go to that spot and you will find the park. And he will be talking about or portraying Sam Houston, or a little bit of both.
Talking about.
He talks about Samuel Houston, and all of you know that Samuel Houston was directly related to this area, and we'll talk about that in just a few minutes. Also, he is part of the Moccasin Bend series that will be held at, I believe that's at UTC this year at what time?
7. I think it's
I
at 7.
believe it's 7
I've got
o'clock.
a flyer here somewhere. We might look at it.
We might need to find that. But anyway, he'll be there, and both of those activities, I think, are free to the public. And if you haven't been to the Memorial Park, which I haven't been, since they put up the big monument to the families, the 1835 Cherokee families that came through there, we need to go see that, and we need to come visit with Troy tomorrow. And Ron and I at this time are planning to be there. We'd love to see you guys tomorrow.
Yes, at 2 o'clock, did you say, right?
2 o'clock at the Blythe Ferry Cherokee Removal
It's not
Park.
often that we have a Supreme Court justice in our building. You know, last week we had moonshiners, so you know we go from one extreme to the other here. But tell us about being what your duties is as the Supreme Court justice of the Cherokee Nation. I mean, what do you hear? I mean,
Well, the Cherokees have since 1827. We've had a tripartite, a three department government. Our ancestors adopted that, had a constitutional convention at New Echota, and put together a government to withstand the encroachments of the white settlers on tribal lands. We needed a strong central government. Since that time, we formed another constitution after we were forced out to the West in 1839. And then as we began to revitalize the tribal government, you know, we were not allowed to have a tribal government after Oklahoma statehood from 1906 until they began to appoint, I think, President Roosevelt appointed a chief. During the New Deal era. They had decided that, golly, maybe you Indians were right when you said that it wasn't a very good policy not to have some sort of tribal government, because between statehood and when the land was divided up, they forced us to allot our lands in 1906. From then till 1936, tribal people all across eastern Oklahoma lost 90% of their land. Just in that 30-year period. So people had fallen into poverty. Well, from that point, when they began to appoint us a chief, the person appointed was an oillionaire. And he was smart enough to go and get the buy-in from all the remaining Cherokee institutions. The Cherokee Baptist Association was probably the strongest surviving institution. And then there was the former seminarians, the people who had gone to our tribal finishing schools. They got in on that. There was a corporation formed called the United Kituwa Band under the New Deal legislation. And they that group of people, but they came together in convention and endorsed him. And through the years, we've gradually begun to get tribal government back. And so up in the 70s, when we began to have people on staff, well, they needed someone. There were protections under Cherokee law against wrongful termination. A new chief can't just fire you. You have to have. And so they had a judicial appeals tribunal. And then as the years went by, we had at some point, and I can't remember the year, but there was a court case that said, you know what? You Indians still have jurisdiction over this land that's held in trust for you by the government. And you still have jurisdiction over pieces of property that have alienation restrictions. People can't just sell property that was divided up and given to each individual family if you were a certain blood quantum. So we had to have a criminal code. And over the years, there's been more authority given to keep Indian children from being sort of adopted outside the trial. So there's Indian child welfare cases. We don't hear many of those. And we would settle, a big part of our work is at election time, we have to settle disputes between over election law. And that's the only place where the Supreme Court
Surely there's no disputes over elections, Troy.
Surely not. But we really work hard during that time because we have to hear evidence. Now, the rest of the time, we serve as an appellate court for district court judges. And they'll hear criminal matters, Indian child welfare matters, employment cases. There's an employee appeals board, and sometimes there's an appeal from that. And every once in a while we have a contract case because we have businesses and people submit to tribal law to do business with our business entities. And
so it's just kind of just whatever comes across that's normal, typical business issues, basically, and family issues. That is very interesting.
You're sort of the final say, though.
That's it.
We're the final say. If they
and how many people are in the Supreme Court?
5.
5 people.
If they lose at your Supreme Court, do they go to the United States Supreme Court, or you just sort of
we're pretty much it, unless
you're the big dog.
For the Cherokee Nation.
For Cherokee Nation.
Now there could be some issue like a civil rights issue. There's some special cases when someone might appeal, but I don't recollect when that's happened.
That is so interesting.
Now, how long have you been on the Supreme Court?
I began to serve in October in 2007. The term actually started in January that year, but we didn't get anybody appointed to take the spot. And the way ours runs is so I'll serve next year and the year after that, and then my term will be over.
And I want to just clarify to everybody, this is with the Cherokee Nation in Oklahoma, not the Eastern Band, which is a totally different thing, right?
Right.
Now, where did your let me bounce around here. Let me be a little ADD here. Where did your family was on the Trail of Tears?
Yes.
Some
of
them.
One branch, of course, there's one branch.
There's so many unknowns.
They didn't. I haven't found any of my folks that signed the treaty, but there were some that went ahead and moved pursuant to the Treaty of New Echota in 1835. They could see the handwriting on the wall. Their name was Pettit. But
where were they from? Do you know?
No. Now the ones.
How does it make you feel coming? And I know you've been in this area several times, but how does it make you feel to come back to this area? I mean, is it? I don't know how that would feel.
It's very rewarding to come back and say, I'm standing at Grandfather Hicks' grave. Now, this is a fellow who was the first Christian chief.
Oh, I did not know that was your grandfather.
Yeah, Charles, and when he was when he accepted Christ, the Moravians it was awfully hard to join the church then. You didn't just stand up and come down front. They consulted I can't say it, they consulted the lot to see what apparently they thought
if they would accept an Indian or Cherokee.
if the Holy Spirit or if God was
now,
ready.
Charles Hicks was very involved during the treaty, I believe, just housing people in the area around Red Clay.
No,
Okay.
he was gone.
All right.
Major Ridge got home from Washington or somewhere just in time to do his funeral. They buried him in a white suit.
Where is he buried?
At Spring Place in God's Little Acre.
Okay.
He
God's Little Acre.
well, that's
That's
what they
where it's
call
at.
it.
Okay.
And I understand he had one of the best libraries in the South.
Wow.
He was a learned man and quite shrewd. He was deputy chief most of his time. The chief was path killer, I think, and
I'm thinking about the same guy, but I haven't studied him deep like you have.
I just talking about his son
maybe
or his nephew.
Okay.
And both of those they married Chief Ross's sisters.
Okay.
The son did, and so did the nephew, and they both led contingents on the Trail of Tears. So it's probably George
that's who I'm
or
thinking.
Elijah. And
okay.
I
Elijah,
think
I think.
George.
Sometimes they call this fella Old Chief Hicks, so you really don't. I don't know, as not a learned person of that family. I don't know which.
The old chief would probably be Charles Renatus because his father was a trader, Nathan Hicks.
Okay.
And there's
a trader, as in a salesperson.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
a trader with a D. Okay. I think he.
So, do you know where Hicks lived? Your Hicks?
He lived in the neighborhood of
Spring
Spring Place.
Place.
Now I know right here's his son-in-law, his daughter's husband, Alexander McCoy, lived right at New Echota.
Okay.
And
so you feel home when you stand on that ground.
When I come there, I feel pretty. I can't say, Debbie, I really feel home, but you feel it's quite a strange. You feel very connected to the area and connected to what they did, and they were a very remarkable generation. That group of people.
We finally are going to see the national park come here and recognize Fort Cass in Charleston, Tennessee, as where the Trail of Tears, basically where many of them left, the headquarters for it. That's going to become a national park, and that's tremendous. Because it was probably it was probably one of the most historic places in America that no one knew where it was except for us local folks. So hopefully we're going to make this a lot bigger story.
That bunch at Charleston's pretty progressive.
Yes, they are.
They're pretty progressive and aggressive.
The first year, about 8 or 9 years ago, that they went to the very first Trail of Tears meeting down in Alabama, and I didn't get to go, but I heard that Faye Calloway, when it was over, she just marched up and got in line and talked to the big dogs from the National Park Service. And she said, when you going to come to Charleston? And they said, where's that? And she wouldn't live. And they said, okay, we'll put you on the list. And they put her down at the bottom of the list. And 6 or 7, 8 years later, they called and said, okay, it's your turn. And she'd never let them forget. She never let them forget that there was a story to tell there. And they've come in and I guess you know all this. They've done all the big evaluation. And they're going to start marking things in Charleston, and it's going to be a driving tour. And thankfully, it's kind of I won't say non-progressive area, but it's an area that hasn't been taken over by huge subdivisions and stuff. So a lot of the land's still intact, that we know where the holding areas were, and we knew where encampments were, and we know now where the soldiers were. It's exciting.
It's a great opportunity for interpretation and
Absolutely.
to tell this story. And
to tell the story. And I had been all over this great country and stood by the sign that said I was so many miles from Fort Cass, but Fort Cass never had a sign. So I am very thrilled that Fort Cass now will be ground zero. You know, you're this far from Oklahoma.
There was a presentation at the last conference.
Yes, there was.
About that.
Darlene Goins, I believe, led it. And she's one of the on fire ladies up there in Charleston, and it takes just a couple of people wound up to make a difference sometimes.
And it's about time. Tell us about Sam Houston. I mean, I know you do a lot of interpretive stories about him, and so tell us about how he's
he was
related.
a mess.
How he's related to right here where you're sitting at. How's he related?
Ron, I haven't done this a lot, so I'm really
Okay,
looking
all right.
forward to it. My folks lived in Madison, suburb of Nashville, where the working folks lived when I was a kid. And when people would come from home, we'd go out to the Hermitage, and I picked up the Sam story, Houston story then, and then down through Texas. And one of the first historical biographies I read, my dad highly recommended Marquise James, The Raven. It was a work of art. It won the Pulitzer Prize in 1929. He very artfully portrayed Sam Houston. I've only come to learn in recent years that he subscribed to the theory that you could fill in a few little details to make things more
Make it more colorful.
Is that called embellishment?
Well, it was he was from a school of historians who thought that was okay.
Yeah.
But I'm also told that he did a great deal of research, and there's a lot to back that up, and there's more letters have come out and more biographies. Sam Houston was a very colorful character. I think it was Henry Steele Commager, I may be mispronouncing, he's a very famous historian, and he said, for Americans, if there hadn't been a Sam Houston, a real one, we would have had to invent one.
You're right.
All the color that goes with him.
Well, he was born in Virginia, right? He was not of Cherokee heritage, no. And his family came down to Blount County. I believe his dad died, and his family somehow ended up in this area.
There were some cousins down here.
Oh, okay.
And his dad had it all mapped out to move anyway. So the older brothers and the mother, and Sam was only about 12, 14 when they moved down here. They, it's not too far from Marysville to Baker Valley.
Merville.
Maryville. Is that what you're supposed to say?
That is what-
Down to
no, it's not
to
on the
removal
waterways.
part down to the
No.
mouth of the Tennessee River,
No, not at all.
or it's the mouth of the Hiwassee that runs
Well,
into
and
the
he was a
Tennessee.
little bit of a defiant child.
Well, he just was. His dad always just rode around and was supervised the state militias in the various counties. He had been a Civil War, celebrated Civil War soldier, and Sam was
Revolutionary
like him.
War, wasn't it?
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
yes,
Revolutionary
War. He didn't take to farming too well. He liked to lay up in the library and read.
Oh, well, yeah.
And he'd be there or down by the creek reading, and at some point they couldn't do much with him, so they sent him to, the family invested in a store, and they sent him to run it, and
He kind of ran off and went to the Cherokees.
yeah.
Yep.
And he spoke fluent Cherokee, and then long after the removal, I'm sorry, not after the removal, after that group of Cherokees, he kind of talked them into going west. And they went down in Arkansas, and then they weren't down there but 10 years, and they talked them into going on further west into where, from that mouth of Illinois Bayou, mouth of the Illinois River in Oklahoma now. He up and resigned as governor of Tennessee and went out there.
Mm-hmm.
And
But now
went-
he basically lived with the Cherokees here on Jolly Island,
Yep.
which is where the Hiwassee and the Tennessee River come together at the removal park, or they're
there
shortly
across
close
the-
by.
Now, most people call that Hiwassee Island.
Yeah,
today,
we
do
call
they?
it Hiwassee Island here. A lot of us do, but it's also the Jolly
Jolly
Island. I
Island, right.
believe I'm correct on that. But he lived there amongst them, and they accepted him as a Cherokee, basically.
Yeah,
That's what history says. I don't know.
Chief Jolly, sure, they did, and even after he was in Oklahoma, there was a problem came up. He wanted to bring in whiskey like the Indian chiefs and traders did for his own use, and the Indian agent kept fussing with him. Of course, he got corrupt Indian agents fired because of his connection with President Jackson. So he had a cure for that. He just had himself legislatively made a Cherokee. That was October 21st in, I think, 1830 or 31. And they just enacted a legislative.
And he's the only person in America's history to ever been governor of two different states. He was governor of Tennessee, Then he went out and did some wild things out west and finally became governor of Texas. He was U.S. Senator from Texas.
Yeah, he was president of Texas.
President of Texas when it was
Yeah.
a country. Yeah. I mean, it's just a fabulous biography when you start reading it. And I assume most of it's true.
Well, I mean, even if you sell,
It's kind of hard to make this stuff up.
no, you couldn't make up Sam Houston. And now he had good success in politics, except that, after he was legislatively made a Cherokee citizen, he decided to stand for council and could
Now,
not
what
get
does stand for council mean?
he ran for tribal council.
Okay.
Among the old settler Cherokees is what we call them now. The people out west.
That took themselves out west.
Right.
Right.
The
older settlers.
that
They went some 20 years before the Trail of Tears or so.
They went from the 1790s on,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
there was a group in 1809 and then in 1819 or 1817, and people kept going, and some came back and forth, and it's hard to track. Sequoyah joined them later on, but he ran for tribal council for one of the his foster father, his adopted father, John Jolly, was chief, but he couldn't get elected. And so, Cherokees say, well, what do you do if you just washed up in a reject for Cherokee politics? Just go on across the Red River, and they might make you the president. You'll be good enough for Texas.
Yep, there you go. Oh, that's. But he had to be some big character. He seemed like he was connected to both sides, the whites and the Cherokees. You think?
He understood everybody.
He understood everybody, and he could work. He could go across that aisle and make a deal. I think.
He was a pretty good politician.
But now he kind of got in trouble.
Well,
What'd
he
they get in
was
trouble for?
And I was going to say too, he married my third great grandmother's second cousin.
And who would that be? One of
Well,
the
there's
Charles?
in Cherokee they'll say a sound that's between D and T, but Tiana.
Oh,
I
okay.
had an aunt Tiani. Tiani's
She's
what they call
buried at Fort Gibson.
at the National
Yes.
Cemetery.
Yes.
Yeah.
I need to visit Fort Gibson.
And she was I have to look, Captain Jack Rogers.
Yes.
Her brothers, James and
Now,
John,
what
were
did
who
they
he-
call Jack Rogers?
Hellfire Jack.
That's
now-
what I was looking for.
He was a
That tells
a
you
Scot.
something too.
He had a couple of Cherokee wives. He married one woman and then married her daughter.
At the same time,
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I don't really think so, but
I've never heard of a mother-daughter deal like that, but I've seen several Cherokee men, especially the mixed breeds, that had two wives at one time. That usually were sisters or cousins or something.
yeah, they were.
They were.
So many people died in the wars, and the customs were just different then.
The customs were different, and they aren't the only people that did that.
Oh, no,
and some of it was you knew that your chances of dying during childbirth were really great, and you wanted somebody that would love and take care of your kids, and they just helped each other raise their children. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I have a.
And then when they got their inheritance from their father, he got two portions. You know.
I've white people did that too. The
Yes, that's
Asher
what I'm
Valley
saying.
in Kentucky, I think I've got a grandaunt, there's an aunt by marriage, whose family and I.
They do.
The guy married a girl and she wouldn't go unless her sister came. It was just too far back up in the sticks, so he had family with both of them.
Ron had some of those relatives too that we found along the way, and it's kind of an interesting story when you start telling it from any viewpoint. But that was the same thing, is that when you were out in the isolated mountains, there weren't a lot of people to choose from.
Well, you just courted to the next house, didn't you? Just whoever happened to live there.
Yeah.
And people didn't wait as long to get married because if you had infant children and things like that, and that was among all classes. That's
Yes.
Now Houston was in the War of 1812 too.
That's kind of where he distinguished himself, fighting the Red Stick Creeks when he was just
Now,
very young.
just give a little description of those red sticks to folks.
I think, now don't get me too far out, but they were heavily influenced by Tecumseh, I think. They were
Yes.
people who said, we're going to all of this innovation and adaptation of European dress and all this blending and the we're not going to have it. We're going to run all of these missionaries and all of these people and these mixed bloods that want to act like white. We're going to run them all out. That was pretty much their mindset, and so a group of Creeks opposed them as well as Cherokees, and because Houston had lived with them when he was younger, spoke Cherokee, then he worked very closely with James and John, the Rogers boys. They were scouts for Jackson's army when they went against the Red Sticks, and so he wound up working very closely with them in that battle. And when he left home, his mother said, "Now here's this ring, and here's a musket, and when you leave here, know this: I'd rather all my sons lie in a common grave than have one of them disgrace himself by turning his back and running in battle.
Ooh.
And know this too: while the door of my cabin is always open for brave men, it's forever shut against cowards."
Wow.
So when you get a send-off like that, and he was bound and determined, he had, I think, made up his mind not to plow. I had an uncle that way. He said, I just couldn't see those
Look at the horse's rear ends.
Yeah, looking at that mule's back and being galded and having to wear a bed sheet and plow naked. And that's what, Grandpa did. He said, I just wasn't, I had decided I was leaving Moonshine Highway and not going to do it. And so he wound up, hauling whiskey and dealing bottom and switching craps and stuff like that. But Sam had kind of decided pretty much, I think, the same thing. So he wanted to distinguish himself in battle. And when he left home, he said, "By golly, they'll hear about me," and they did. They heard.
And
a
he
great deal about
died
him.
during the Civil War. And do we have a call?
No, not yet.
Oh,
but we're
I'm
going
sorry.
to in just a
I'm
minute.
sorry. Ron was waving at
I'm
me.
going to say, I wanted to say you're listening to Whoop FM 99.9, Old Town Cleveland Early Edition, and we have Troy Poteet here, the Supreme Court Justice of the Cherokee Nation and President of the Trail of Tears.
Or executive director.
Executive Director.
Yeah.
That's
I don't know
different.
what the difference
There's
is.
difference. Well, for years I was the vice president.
Yeah, okay.
I was a founding member of the board, and then at some point, the current president, Jack Baker, is active in lots of historical organizations,
Yes.
serving in the tribal council now, and that's a great deal bigger job than it was when I did it in the 90s. So I was very active as vice president. I did as much as I could, working with the state chapters. And they're the folks that are on the ground that are finding exactly where did this trail go, and they're working with local officials, highway officials, to put signs up and interpretive signs, and working with the Park Service to supply the information that the historians will check for accuracy. And they got professional staff people to do it, and they've got people to design signs so that they approach the public on their different levels. And so there's the association does a lot of work. And when our director quit, I thought, I've been touring for years. I'd always liked to go and talk at this group and do this, but I had to make a living. I had to work, practice law some, because the Supreme Court's not a full-time job. So I said, well, Kelly, it's sure going to be a headache to get someone trained to do this. And the board said, well, it'll be all right. If you'll take the job, we'll hire you. So I've really enjoyed it. It's been a lot of work the last 6 months, and I'm looking forward
He just put on a big deal, a convention out in Memphis that you and I had gone to Vicksburg and missed, and I
Right.
missed that. First one I've missed in years.
Yeah, you can call us here at 614-5553. Have a question for Troy Poteet? Someone's calling us here. Good morning, you live on Old Town Cleveland.
Ron,
Yes.
Bob Gill.
Hey, Bob Gill, how are you?
Bob, good morning, buddy. What's up?
Hi, I'm listening and enjoying listening to the program this morning. Let me turn it.
Turn your radio down, baby.
but I'm familiar with the park over there. I've done some work over there for. I've got a piece of property over there in Meigs County, close to the park, but I've done some work over there, and I just wondered if the question could be answered. Maybe one day will the state come in and take that park over there and head that up, or will that always be headed up by the Cherokee Nation?
I think, it is a Meigs County park at this moment, is my understanding. And it will remain a Meigs County park until the county of Meigs decides to turn it over to someone else. I think it possibly, I know it could be a state park, and it could possibly be a national park too. But at this point in time, it was their baby, and they raised it, and they're just kind of wanting to keep it at this moment. The hotel taxes from Meigs County pays the salary of the part-time person that works there. There's lots of volunteers. But I think at this moment it's a local park, and it's going to remain that way until they decide that they're going to turn it over to someone
And another
else.
problem, Bob, that really gets me is that on I-75, one of the busiest interstates in the we cannot get one of those brown historical signs put on there to mark to go there because it's 2 miles farther from this interstate than it should be.
17 miles instead of 15.
So Bob Bell, Senator Bob Bell, if you're listening, we got to correct
not
that.
Bob Bell, Mike Bell.
Mike Bell, excuse me. Yeah. Mike Bell, we need to get that correct.
We do. It needs a big old brown sign on the interstate that says the Cherokee Removal Park is this way.
It don't matter how many miles off. It's a historical park. That's what we need to mark.
Hey, Bob Gill,
Yes.
I have the tickets that someone gave you. I don't remember. Maybe it was Bullet that left for you, and I have that card that Red left for you.
Okay.
I have them in my bag. I'm not going to leave them here.
Okay. Please hold on to them, and I'll come and get them one Saturday morning. Will that be all right?
That'd be
yes.
great, yeah.
That'd be great.
All right. Well, listen, on getting back to the park over there,
Okay.
we got this. I've been working close hand in hand with the commissioner that just got ousted over there in the past election, and I've taken the backhoe over there and done some work around in the park over there and different things. But there's really nobody now other than the ousted commissioner there that got beat to answer the questions about what is going on. And I mean, we've got several volunteers that want to go over there, and I know that the lady that works there in the park, Nancy, she's trying to roll along here with this thing and keep it up, keep everything going with the commissioner standing in the background. But who would
That's some of the problem, Bob, is that every time it gets going, there's an election and they get a new mayor and they get new county commissioners, and there's nothing that can be done about it until that county commission decides that they're going to ask the state to take it over. Yeah. I fought this battle for a little while.
All right.
Thank you, my dear. Hope to see you tomorrow there.
All you got to
Bye-bye.
do is
2 o'clock.
speak up loudly, Bob. That's what you got to do. Call Mike Bell and tell him that you want that at State Park.
All righty.
Well,
Bye-bye.
We need to call the commissioner from over in Ray County. We also need some signs over in Dayton.
That's
Yes.
true.
Over there on Highway 27 and leading to that park over there, and maybe the gentleman there can put in his.
He'll put in his 2 cents worth.
I think Ronnie Raper's the guy we'll talk to over there.
Thank you, Bob. Bye-bye.
You have anything?
No.
No.
Okay.
Well, I have to mention we're kind of short on time here. I wanted to talk about your turban that you have on. What got you interested in turbans? And we've been educating here for 5 years that the Cherokees in this area did not wear those big old fancy headdresses. So why do you have on a turban?
Well, I got interested in them because I live in Sequoyah County now.
Mm-hmm. Are you on
Sequoia-
old family property?
Yes, I am. I'm on my
That is fascinating.
from the front door where my mother was raised, you could look out to the neighbor's hog lot, and he had the foundations of Chief Jolly's home was that's what he used to keep the hogs in. And it's on the banks of Deep Branch, and I still live on that property. And so Chief Jolly wore a turban, Sequoyah did, and Sam Houston did.
Oh, did Sam?
Yeah, he was wearing a turban. That caused a huge conflict with he and John C. Calhoun, the senator from North Carolina that wanted to nullify enactments of Congress that he didn't think were constitutional. Anyhow, one day I was trying to wrap a piece of cloth, the striped cloth, around the base of an old hat, and my wife said, "What are you doing? What's that?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to make a turban. It's real cold out." And Chief Keeler's son was bringing a dignitary, and they were going to play marbles. And she said, "Well, you can't wear that because I'm going, and I'm not going to anybody that wears such a thing." So it took 7 tries. There were none of these left from historic times. And the 7th one, she finally got where it would tie, and it looked like sequoias, and we were told in some of the literature that he could take it off and put it back on without tying it every time.
And we have one of those sitting on our counter if you're watching. It's it just sits the way it is.
Yeah,
now the funny thing is that in my lifetime, at some point in time, I've been a little bit of a seamstress, and I would have done that totally different. But when he was putting it on, I was amazed to see it looks like a giant sleeping stocking.
Yeah, looks like it looks like a bed hat.
Yeah,
a long one.
And he puts obviously the biggest opening on his head, and it's got a little Velcro to make it tight, and then he wraps it. He just wraps it around and tucks it in. And I thought, well, that's genius. I would have just had a big piece of cloth that I would have done what you were doing with the hat and would have probably wrapped it.
And there was a famous Cherokee artist named Cecil Dick. He was the 4th person after Sequoyah to win the Sequoyah Medal for pioneering in painting, and he had one a turban that was on a base that I had seen. He's the only one person in my time, but except in theatrical situations, that wore one.
Now, if someone's curious and wants to see those on your website, what's your website, Troy?
www.troywayne.net.
TroyWayne.net.
And that website needs to be updated. If you see something on there you want, send a message before you order it, and I might send you pictures of what I've got available now. I want to try to get that done this winter, updated. But there's a lot of pictures on there of different people wearing turbans.
So now, would the mixed bloods have wore the turbans, or would
Sure, Sequoyah was mixed blood.
Yes, he was.
Did you know that Sequoyah's sister was married to Andrew Jackson's newspaper man, the newspaper that,
Oh, the soap opera continues.
Yeah.
When you have time sometime, I'll tell you my Andrew Jackson story.
In
a nutshell, I was over for a conference in Nashville, and I went over by myself to tour, and it was a beautiful day, and I went over to the slave cabins, and there was some man and woman there, and they were just, Andrew Jackson. I said, well, he wasn't such a nice guy. And I proceeded to tell them all the ugly things that he had done to the Native Americans, and there was a roll of thunder that shook the ground, and that family left, and it came the most horrendous downpour you've ever been in your life. And I'm standing in this little slave cabin on the back of the farm all by myself, and I finally said, okay, I'll leave if it'll quit raining.
Oh, that's a good story. I'll tell you that.
I said, Ron, I'm not sure I can go back there or not.
I admire the group there for trying to modernize.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful, and you need to go see it. Just don't say bad things about Andrew Jackson while you're there.
Well, they've tried to tell the story of how the enslaved people lived, and I thought that was good. And they approached the tribe and wanted to.
Well, you need to tell all the story when you're telling it.
And they came to the tribe and said, we would like to tell that side of the story too. And so and we'd like to certify it as a Trail of Tears interpretive place. And so we said, well, okay, we'll cooperate. I got in a bit of trouble, though, because
No, Troy, not
no,
you.
surely not me. I had been there quite a lot as a child and was familiar with his unhappy Indian policy and kind of how tribal people thought about him.
Oh, that's right. You grew up in Nashville.
Yeah,
No,
just
no.
a few years,
Just a few
grade
years.
school. But I didn't have as great an aversion to it because I'd been exposed to it. It's just a piece of history. Well, I said, I'll work on that. Well, they wanted to do an event. The thing is, and I know because I've worked in this kind of work, that you stack events. You'll get 2 or 3 things going at once. It gets up bigger crowds, and I wasn't really paying attention. The day that I agreed to come to do this site certification ceremony and so forth and have the Park Service people there was on Andrew Jackson's birthday. Oh, and I did catch it for him. So we went to Hyde Park with the Presidential Site organization and talked about Cherokees pretty much have an aversion to Andrew Jackson because of his.
And I got tickled in one of the early years of the Trail of Tears. They had a conference, and they loaded all these people from the Trail of Tears conference and took them over to Andrew Jackson's farm. And they weren't real happy because, it's just part of that story that don't make it in the history books, in the high school history books anyway, about, the things that was done. We only have a few more minutes, Troy. Weber's Falls. Why is that called Weber's Falls? Do you know?
The old settlers had 3 chiefs, and Walter Weber was one of them. They say that's because we were moved over in Osage territory, and we were always fussing with them, and we needed a line of succession. When we made the treaty, the old settlers did in 28, and moved from central Arkansas over there. There was a warehouse on the side of the river where the falls stopped the steamboats going up any further, and they couldn't get around most of the year up to Fort Gibson. Well, these white people had a salt works and a salt warehouse. Well, they had to leave, and the borders of Arkansas were rolled back to their current place, and Walter Weber got their salt warehouse. And that's where he began to, he was a trader. He imported things to sell to the rest of the tribe. And so they began to call it the Falls at Weber, or Weber's Falls. And so that's how we...
and that's where you live?
That's where I was brought up, yeah.
Okay.
Where
do you live now?
Well, I live on the hill above Talentesky Courthouse where Chief Jolly lived.
Okay.
So Weber's Falls, in those days when
Sorry.
you say that the boat landed at Weber's Falls in the mouth of the Illinois, those are almost interchangeable. The mouth of the Illinois is a mile below Weber's Falls. And so that whole area is, it's all really one community almost. So, and Weber's Falls was, now where I live is across the Arkansas. In those old days, that was a wider river, and you had to ford it and all that. So everything south of the Arkansas was the old Canadian district and that was set aside as a settling place for Confederate sympathizers and freed people. And it was a big plantation district. Rich Jovan recreated at Weber's Falls the house that still stands at Spring Place at Cartersville.
Is it still there?
No, the Yankees burned it. And everything else.
Can't trust those Yankees.
Well,
Well, Troy, this has been such a fascinating...
One final question. How many members of the Cherokee Nation now?
I think about 330,000, roughly half of those within the old boundaries in northeastern Oklahoma. I would say another 20% of them within driving distance, somewhere along the border in Arkansas and Oklahoma. And then we've got Cherokee community organizations in all the metropolitan areas up and down the West Coast.
Is the Cherokees the biggest tribe left of Indians in the nation now?
Maybe the Navajos.
Might be larger.
Might
they
be
still have
larger.
a true reservation then, right?
Yes, there's this.
And so, but the Cherokee is not a reservation now.
We never really were a reservation.
I always had that misunderstanding.
Well,
about that.
they call it a jurisdictional area now. We've got a fee patent title to it from, I think, President Van Buren. It's it's as big as that TV screen. It's this wide and this tall, and it's a deed. essentially we pursuant to the Treaty of New Echota, we did get a land base that the government titled
Okay,
to us.
Troy, the next time you come back to this area, please give us a heads up, and we want to have you back on the show.
Well, I'm
Because
glad
I
to be
can tell
here.
by the chatter here on the internet that folks are just really enjoying this, and I hate that it was only 45 minutes. And again, you can see Troy tomorrow at 2:00 at the Cherokee Memorial Removal Park in Meigs County. Just go where the old ferry used to leave on the western bank, and you will be there. And it's free to the public, and he'll be talking about Sam Houston, and you can have your picture made with him. He's quite photogenic, and
Well, thanks for that.
and then on Monday night he will be part of the Moccasin Bend series at UTC. We believe that starts at 7:00. Both of those
that's a
activities
good
are free.
series all the way down there.
Now he's going to be talking about the Trail of Tears from a Cherokee perspective on Monday night. Correct?
Yes.
Yes. And so that'll be a totally different thing. Thank you so much, Troy, my friend. I appreciate you being with us today.
I'm so glad to be here. Look forward to coming back.
Well, good.
Hey,
In
good deal.
about 15 minutes, our regular segment of Old Town Cleveland, and we've got some veterans here, and we're going to honor Veterans Day. And we'll be talking to you in about 15 minutes. We'll see you then.
Where'd the old town go? They moved it on north of here in a shopping mall. Ooh, where'd the old town go? Did my hometown get old, or just me? Did all my friends get old, or just me? Are they all gonna have to be told, or just